Good morning. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to Reset 2026, Dialogues to Reduce Food Loss and Waste in India, hosted by WRI India, Indian Council of Agriculture Research, and Friends of Champions 12.3. Our theme for this year of Reset is building resilient and inclusive livelihoods through circular food systems. Food loss and waste is a key food systems challenge. Every year, valuable food resources, nutrients are lost across the value chain, from farms and markets to food service establishments and households. Addressing this challenge presents one of the greatest opportunities to improve nutrition security, strengthen farmer livelihoods, enhance business efficiency, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and build more resilient and circular food systems. Solutions already exist across the food supply chain. By working together, farmers, businesses, cities, researchers, entrepreneurs, civil society, hotel, restaurants, and catering, and government can scale what works and close the gaps that lead to food to be lost or wasted. Reset creates that shared space for dialogue, learning, and collective action. Across these 2 days, we'll explore how to connect innovation, policy, and practice, build resilient, inclusive, and circular markets, understand the impacts on nutrition, livelihoods, and climate, and unlock finance for innovation and new opportunities. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge and sincerely thank all our thematic partners whose support and collaboration has made Reset 2026 possible. We are grateful to the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, Sapling, the World Bank Group, Pune Municipal Corporation, and Indore Municipal Corporation for their continued partnership and commitment towards advancing this important agenda. It is now my privilege to invite Madhav Pai, Chief Executive Officer, WRI India, to deliver the opening plenary and welcome address. Please join me in welcoming Madhav.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for making it in the rains. I came from Mumbai, so this is not rain. We had very big rain days actually earlier in the week. But really want to welcome you, not on behalf of all the partners, ICAR, Friends of Champion 12.3 India Network, and WRI India. We are also very, very thankful to all our thematic partners, FAO, Sapling, World Bank Group, and Pune and Indore Municipal Corporation for partnering for this event. As was mentioned, I think what I'll do is I'll take a few minutes to share also what WRI India does broadly, and then talk a little bit about Reset. So if I can have some slides. Very quickly, I think, we all know WRI really works at this intersection of people, nature, and climate. We all know that we are facing really this big threat from climate change. I think this year's summer has made it even more tangible, the real impact on people's lives and livelihoods that climate change really causes. And we really see that, there is a huge opportunity for us to really think about this as also a moment where we can rekindle something, create something that almost creates a movement towards thinking differently and creating a transformation, to protect ourselves from sort of all of these sort of upcoming dangers that we see from climate change. So at WRI India, we really try to look at every problem from these eyes of how do we improve people's lives, protect and restore nature while we address climate change, and that this whole people, nature, climate approach becomes central to how we think about things. We work across the country, and also we work through 4 programs. So this is part of our food, land, water program. This particular initiative, we also work on the energy transition, and we do a lot of work also in cities and transport. And of course, in all of these things, we are also trying to see how we can really think about the economics, the financing of this transformation, and trying to bring that perspective into each of these conversations. Within this also we work on specific initiatives, and so these are about 20 initiatives that we work on, food loss and waste being one of those initiatives. And in each of these initiatives, then I can talk about sort of what is that we do. Our approach always has been, we say count it, change it, scale it. I mean, it's a way of, I think, bringing, I mean, we are a knowledge organization, we are a research organization, we're always trying to bring data, analytics to a problem, but then also trying to see how does this really meaningfully translate to some change on the ground. But I mean, us as a small organization or small initiatives, I think the scale of India is too large, and we always have to think about, and a lot of times thinking about scale means, you can't just replicate what you do at one place in many places. You have to completely reimagine, redesign this. So typically we say that we play 4 roles. I think one idea is to, like I said, create research and knowledge, catalyze some of these pilots and prototypes, but then really build these platforms. I feel like so Reset is one of these platforms that we work with partners trying to put this together. This allows us to bring a wider range of actors, young innovators, policy makers. This time we were able to run a poster competition, get young children involved. So the whole idea is to how do you create a platform where we can get a large number of organizations together, and hopefully through that we are able to then identify ways in which we can really think about, meaningfully or solving this or addressing this problem at some meaningful scale. So we have WRI India this year completed 15 years in India. So we have been doing a few of these sort of publications. This is just, our top 15 publications that we have put together. As you can see, the first one is the tomato trail. That's also really documenting the food losses in the tomato value chain. And I think bringing that similar methodology now in partnership with ICAR, we've been looking at other, commodity value chains as well. But, so that's one. Of course, we're always looking to catalyze pilots and prototypes. I think this one I really like because this is where this is in Surat, where they are working with textile clusters. All of them use thermal coal, but mostly pet coke, which is really bad. And, of course, Bharuch is also the peanut capital of India. So they are trying to make these briquettes are made from peanut shells. And so this whole circularity idea and how to use then also sort of agricultural waste. So coconut shell and peanut shells, and I think now about 150 of the units are using this. But again, I think what does it mean to then scale this across, but I think, so that's, but, and then finally, I think really looking at these specific places, and then I think what we have learned is, I think rather than us trying to go to many places also, I think the idea of creating these kind of platforms really works. So yeah, I mean, I think from that perspective, I think this Reset platform is great, and we hope that, we are really able to bring lots of partners together. We have done similar things, for example, in the building sector with a lot of different actors. We put together the decarbonization business charter for real estate. We've been doing the India Nature-Based Solutions Forum, similarly on freight electrification. So there's a range of issues, and there is a certain methodology we want to bring to building these platforms, because that's how we believe we can really drive action and impact at scale. So we also look at a lot of accelerators. We've done accelerators on land restoration. We've done accelerators on last mile connectivity to metro stations. Similarly, I think we're really aspirational to do a food waste accelerator soon. Hopefully that happens. And we recently also have been running this Keep Cool challenge, which is to see how we can use cooling technologies for that are already available, but for people trying to solve problems, whether it's food storage, whether it's cooling in schools for low-income kids. So accelerators, another way in which we try to work and engage a broader range of stakeholders. So and I think all of this, I think we are trying to see how we can maybe think of ways in which we can really bring a systems thinking approach and find strategic ways in which we can drive transformation, how we can really widen the sort of way in which we can engage with the ecosystem. And really, I think all of it eventually is also how do we bring more finance to the problem, because eventually that's what's going to be needed. So yeah, I think with that, just wanted to give you context of, how we think about it. And I think that's the motivation behind putting this event together. We truly believe that this is a partnership. We are very, very happy for a lot of our partners to participate in this event. And I think we know that we have quantified crop losses now. It's over 1.5 lakh crores a year. Food waste is over close to 100 million tons in cities. I mean, these are just also very, very early estimates. I'm sure the numbers are very high. And I think, we can get substantial impact if we are able to really solve this very relatively visible problem, but not quantified. It's a visible but not quantified problem. And I think we are able to do that. So again, thank you. I think the agenda, first day is mostly going to be focused on post-harvest loss at farm level, wholesale markets, innovation opportunities, supply chains. Day 2 will be focused much more on food waste and circularity, working with, Horeca and other innovators, and also sort of some of the tools that have been developed in this context. So we also have an exhibition area in the back. I think it also gives, also trying to sort of bring more voices to this conversation, much more nuanced voices to the conversation. So yeah, with that, I think, really, I think reducing food loss and waste is improving farmers' incomes, improving nutrition security, creating green jobs, it is climate resilience, it is creating circular systems. It is really, how can we make this event that seed for that transformation, that we were talking about. So this is like I said, this is a very visible and not quantified problem. How can we make this much more solvable? How can we use this opportunity to have more conversations about that? And so with that, I welcome all of you to Reset 2026 and look forward to the conversation side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madhav, for setting the tone for the dialogues. I now request Rituja Basu, Program Head, Food Loss and Waste, Food, Land and Water, WRI India, for the context-setting address.
As we wait for the slides. Good morning, everyone, and welcome once again to Reset 2026. We are very excited to have you all here, and thank you all for being here despite the weather not being in our favor. As we begin, I wanted to place today's discussion within the larger context of India's food systems. India is one of the world's largest agricultural producers. We are the leading producers of millets, pulses, with milk, second largest producers of fruits and vegetables, and many more commodities. Also, agriculture and forests remain the backbone of the Indian economy, with 86% of our farmers being small and marginal. It is a critical conversation around livelihoods. Thus making agriculture and food systems not just an economic sector, but a critical source of income, employment, and resilience. At the same time, our food system faces increasing pressure from climate change, resource constraints, and the challenge of feeding a growing population sustainably. What is often overlooked is the food that is produced ultimately never reaches the right plates. Overall, food loss and food waste is a significant crisis that India is facing. Are the slides there? Right. Yeah. 5 to 15% of the food produced is lost post-harvest, and 26% is wasted at the consumption stage. Before discussing solutions, it's important to establish a common understanding of what we mean by food loss and food waste. Food loss, as we can see, occurs on farm post-harvest, During storage, transportation, and during processing, food waste occurs at the later stages of the supply chain, at the retail, food service, and in our own households at consumption stages. This distinction matters because the interventions that are required are different. A farmer struggling with post-harvest losses needs different set of solutions than a retailer managing inventory or a household making purchase decisions. Today, we will focus on all three spokes of the food loss. We will be talking about experiences from farm. We have a session which looks at markets and the loss that happens there and strategies thereof, and also the role that businesses can play towards reducing food loss. Food loss and waste, of course, is not unique to India. These are global challenges with profound implications. Almost 24% of the world's calories are wasted due to food loss and food waste. What this means is also an equivalent impact in terms of climate, environment, all of the resources that go into growing the food are also lost and wasted, and significant emissions result thereof. 8 to 10% of the global greenhouse emissions are accounted to food loss and waste. When we look at India, the story is not much different. We lose, just in post-harvest losses, we lose food worth 1.53 lakh crores every year, matching with equivalent volumes of water and significant emissions leading thereof. And the numbers on the waste side are also not very different. One of the reasons that food loss and food waste is such a difficult challenge to solve for is because there is no single cause. Food can be lost because of inadequate storage, infrastructure gaps, climate-related disruptions, market inefficiencies, lack of access to technology. It can be wasted because of consumer behavior, procurement practices, aesthetic standards, operational inefficiencies, and many more. The challenge, therefore, is systemic. It spans farms, supply chains, markets, businesses, cities, and households. And over the next 2 days, we will be focusing on each of these nodes. While the causes may be complex, the global direction is clear. SDG target 12.3 calls for us to halve per capita food waste and reduce food loss globally across supply chains by 2030. The Target Measure Act is a well-known approach and a known pathway to work towards the same. What this means is stakeholders need to set fixed targets for reducing food loss and waste, measure scientifically the amount of loss and waste that is happening at that supply chain, because we cannot reduce what we cannot measure, and then act on the solutions that are there towards meeting those targets. At WRI India, we work with a similar approach. We work with governments, businesses, and other stakeholders towards establishing targets and aligning action around shared goals. We focus on measurement through tools, understanding where loss and waste occur, why they occur, and what impacts they create, enabling efficient decision-making. We also support on-ground action through partnerships, whether it is through building capacity, technical assistance, pilot interventions, behavior change initiatives, and many more. Our ultimate objective is to ensure that reducing food loss and waste contributes directly to resilient livelihoods and more sustainable food systems. We, of course, realize that this is not a challenge that any one organization can solve alone, and we are deeply committed to the cause of partnerships. We are thrilled to have most of our partners in the room with us today and also tomorrow. We anchor the Friends of Champions 12.3 network, which is a vibrant network of around 40 organizations working across India on issues around food loss and waste. Several of them are also exhibiting over the next 2 days, and I would encourage all of you to look at some of the very unique solutions that India has to offer, and look at how we can collaborate and bring these actions to scale, look at unlocking the pathways and enablers that are needed towards moving the needle at a national level. With that, I welcome you all once more to 2 exciting days of discussions and hopefully collaborations. Thank you all once again.
Thank you, Rituja, for highlighting both the scale of the challenge and the opportunities for collective action. We now move on to our inaugural panel discussion, Bridging Innovation, Policy and Practice to Reduce Food Loss and Food Waste. To moderate the discussion, it is my pleasure to invite Dr. Ruchika Singh, Executive Program Director, Food, Land and Water, WRI India. Dr. Ruchika has more than 2 decades of experience working on environmental and development issues, providing leadership and building programs. At WRI India, she provides overall strategic direction on how to inform India's transition towards sustainable food and land use systems with a focus on strengthening food systems. May I also request our distinguished panelists to kindly join us on stage. We have Takayuki Hagiwara, India Country Representative, Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. As FAO's representative to India, he is supporting the regional office to implement FAO's strategic framework and oversee the development and implementation of the programs in the region, providing guidance to technical officers at the regional office. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Takayuki. Next, we have Dr. Gayatri Acharya, Practice Manager for Agriculture and Food in South Asia, World Bank. Dr. Gayatri has over 20 years of experience in development, policy and operations. She leads strategy, investments and policy dialogue and has held leadership roles across Africa, Latin America and East Asia, overseeing programs in sustainable landscapes, rural infrastructure and livelihoods, agribusiness, trade and competitiveness, and women's economic empowerment. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Gayatri. Our next panelist is Dr. Devendra Dhingra, Principal Scientist, Process Engineering, Indian Council of Agriculture Research, ICAR. Dr. Dhingra is specialized in post-harvest engineering, reduction in post-harvest losses, storage of food grains, food safety management systems, setting up of food testing laboratories, preparation of bankable project reports, setting up of agro-processing enterprises, and development of technologies. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Devendra Dhingra. We have Ananya Pandey, Deputy Director Level Officer, Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, FSSAI, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. Ananya has served as Officer on Special Duty to the CEO, FSSAI, and is presently engaged in policy initiatives related to social and behavior change, the Eat Right India program, and sustainability initiatives. She has over 14 years of experience in public policy, food regulation, strategic planning, and government administration. Thank you. I invite Dr. Ruchika to initiate the panel discussion.
Thank you, Drishti, and welcome again to Reset 2026. This is the second edition, and we are grateful for the partnership with Indian Council for Agriculture Research and the thematic partners, World Bank, Sapling, FAO, Pune, and Indore Municipal Corporation. Very, very excited about this. So when we started sort of talking, last year at some point, we've been working on food loss and waste issues. There's a lot of disparate work that's happening in country. But one of the fragmented sort of, point that we've seen is a lot of conversation in India when we talk about food systems, it ends up being about production systems. A lot more focus on agriculture. How do we sort of improve, yields? How do we sort of look at the right kind of agricultural inputs which would help in environmental sustainability? How do we help men and women farmers, etc.? These are all important topics. However, when we talk about food systems, it's not just the production system. What happens post-harvest is equally important. However, that's the one which is not getting enough attention, and that's one of the reasons why we sort of started thinking about we need much more curated conversation on, this particular topic on food loss and food waste. And I think Rituja and Madhav earlier have really laid out very well on why we need this. And one point that kind of stays, food loss or waste is a very visible problem. All of you, and I know from the sector, we have all sort of working in the field. During the harvest season, if we go out, we are, in the villages or in the highways, we're always seeing sort of, tomatoes after harvest are, in the high temperature and sun, just there without shade. Or chilies that are being harvested also strewn across the highways, etc. Not the best optimal way. We are thinking about, so much of inputs that goes into producing some of that food that women farmers and other farmers are doing. But what happens post-harvest? So really what I want to discuss with this esteemed panel today is how do we sort of, if we really want a food systems transformation, production system is important, we all are working on it, we also look at agriculture very closely, but how do we also think about issues that come post-harvest, looking at all the way in the value chain at the consumption level? so that the food doesn't go, reaches the plate it's supposed to, or it doesn't go into the landfill. What kind of investments are needed? What kind of partnerships are needed? What kind of technologies are needed? So that's really what I want to tease out a bit more with all of you today. And I want to start first with you, Dr. Dhingra. I mean, if we are thinking about reducing food loss and waste, what kind of investments or more, how do we bring more investments and, focus into the sector? We're seeing piecemeal some of this happening, but what do you think we can do better? How do we get their attention?
You have rightly pointed out that we have not yet given much attention to the post-harvest sector. Mostly we were focusing on production sector, where most of the schemes were also designed to mechanize our farms and to increase the yield. Subsidy was on inputs, but post-harvest sector got neglected. But recently, in the last 5 to 10 years, this sector is also have become very important. A lot of innovations have been done by the public sector, and these are involved around farmers and farmer-centric, not for the large industries, so that they can become affordable to them with minimum of investment and they can make out some business. But bringing investment into the sector, when I experience personally that if we tell someone that this is the post-harvest opportunity or enterprise, if they can do, so first we have to convince them what will be the benefit. If I am putting some 1 rupee, what will be the benefit out of that? At this point, we have lacked. We have not been able to convince them by this enterprise at this level of scale, we can make a profitable enterprise and a business so that the investments will come. And then the banks also were not very willing. So if we are able to make some detailed project reports or post-harvest enterprises, which can be taken up in the rural areas, and we can communicate the benefits to the end users and the people who will get engaged, who will get employment in that, I think investment will not be a problem in that case. But we have to first explain to them that this enterprise, by investing that much money, really one can make a money out of it. There will be, and definitely then there will be a reduction in losses and more increased level of processing and more affordability and accessibility for the individuals as well as the farming families. In that case, the government of India will also come up. There are a lot of schemes from the Ministry of Food Processing Industries, Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. There is a scheme on submission on agricultural mechanization. Apart from farm machinery, now the post-harvest equipment, solar cold storage, and other things are also included. If the individuals, they want to have subsidy on that, the people can avail of that. Similarly, NCCD, NHB, they also have schemes in which people can take some money from them to make them more affordable, the post-harvest enterprises. So investment, I think, will not be a problem. The moment we explain what are the benefits of investing in that enterprise, once we explain it to that, once we market that convincingly, then I think investments will not be a problem. Even the banks, NABARD and others, they will also come up. Even the startups are being funded by the government. So the investment is, I think, not a big issue until and unless we have something which is to the scale which is required in our landscape. Because in India, the production as well as the consumption, we are very diverse. So we cannot say that one large company can meet the requirements of whole of India. Because our taste changes, our needs also change, and the production also changes. Local production, local processing, and local consumption. So if that can be convinced, and then people can be given some profitable ventures, then investments will not be an issue. I think that's enough from my point.
Thank you, Dr. Dhingra. I mean, important points in terms of this innovation. I think for market signals, for investments to flow, we need to communicate better on benefits is one of the takeaways for me. I do have a follow-up on that, but I'm asking the same question to everyone. So I'd like to come to you, Mr. Hagiwara. I mean, from your perspective, where should India focus to reduce food loss and waste, and how do we get more attention and investment in the sector?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. FAO is currently preparing the A proposal together with the SIDB to be submitted to the Green Climate Fund on food loss, post-harvest losses. In that preparation, we studied the NAPCON's report. I don't know how many of you know the report. It is very, very good report, and anyone here should look at it. According to the report, and we know that more than 85% of food loss, post-harvest loss, not in the production, post-harvest loss, more than 85% of loss happen on the farm operations. After including the harvest, and then get out those products getting out of the farm gate, 85% of loss happen on the farm. Only 15% of loss happening in after the farm gate. And this is the hard sort of the data that NAPCON gathered. And based on this, we also look into the technologies, how to reduce in the technologies. Technology is available, but there is always trade-off. And this is what you really need to understand. You know, that when you go to the shopping, you buy the vegetable and all of that, unless it's the process, what do you think, what you're going to do is put those vegetable, fruit, many of those food into the refrigerator. Meaning, you are creating the small cold chain in your house. It means you are using the energy to cold your vegetable and your food to preserve and then eat later. This is what you do and what we do. It means there is the trade-off in terms of the energy consumption. So if you create that cold chain in your house, you are also using the energy to emit the more CO2, greenhouse gases, atmosphere. We thought by introducing the technology, then we will be able to reduce the lost harvest loss. It can be done. But if you just uses the conventional technology, it has the trade-off. It has the trade-off to emit more energies, this greenhouse gases. This is what we have know now. And so it is not that simple, straightforward logic. It's not linear. We also need to think about how to deal with the climate as well, because those products, agriculture products, if the temperature goes up, the ripening stage faster, and then those food deteriorate faster. And if there is the heavy rain like this, then inundate the area, and then even the storage will be affected. And then it has the more moisture, you have the fungal attack and aflatoxin issues happening. So there is always you need to think about the relationship with the climate as well. And also, when you want to preserve more food, you use the plastic. And then the plastic also affects the environment. So there is always a trade-off. You need to think about how to deal with the food loss as well as the climate and what is an impact. I can stop here. There must be a lot of the innovation that we really need to think. But in terms of the GHG emission from the food loss, even if you introduce the technology, the amount of the emission of the greenhouse gases goes up. Even you can reduce the food loss, but the emission of the GHG gas goes up. So this is the reality of what the data shows us. And thank you very much for NAPCON. It's a really good paper, and I think if anyone here should look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Agiwara. I think thanks for nuancing this a bit more in terms of when we think about reducing post-harvest losses, or when we think about solutions, while data is available, if you've not seen the last study that Ministry of Food Processing Industry Commission, which NAPCONS came out in 2022, really good data on, up to 54 commodities on where losses are across the supply chain. So importance of data becomes one, but I think when your larger point on trade-offs is a critical one. And I'll link it to investments, right? What kind of investments eventually come in the sector? We need to really think about whether this solution would work in the long term, especially given the, with the climate change, we are also facing different kind of risks and impact. And how do we really design and strategize for the long haul that we are in? So those are the two key takeaways that I have, which kind of brings me, Ananya, if I can come to you. And, from FSSAI's perspective, and just again the same question, where do you really see when we think about reducing food loss and waste? How do we get more attention and investment in the sector? How do we start?
First of all, congratulations to WRI for organizing this very imperative dialogue and coming all the way from Mumbai and rubbing some of your reins in the past Delhi. Yes, what you said is absolutely right, that food loss mostly occurs upstream, whereas food waste occurs more closer to us. That is in households, in retail places, in eateries. So how we see mostly food loss is probably more of a infrastructure issue, but food waste is primarily a behavioral issue. And I would just take a minute to establish why I say that and request all of you to reflect with me historically, reflect with me about how the Indian relationship with food availability has been historically. So from around 1750 to 1950, for around 2 centuries, the country has endured extreme food scarcity and food unavailability, which was marked with dozens of famines, dozens of droughts. So whether it was in 1700s, there was the Great Famine, then in the 1800s, Bengal famine, and then again in 1943, Bengal famine, which was again aggravated by the colonial policies, by high land taxes, revenue taxes, forced commercialization of agriculture. We were forced to actually move from producing food to cash crops, and almost no availability or very poor availability of storage infrastructure. All of that led to a lot of starvation and would have costed around 44 million lives, as the data says. Then even when we moved on after independence around 1950 to 51, then also the country was a food deficit nation. Gradually, with a lot of investment, good investment in irrigation, in scientific agriculture, and public distribution system, storage paraphernalia, we now are a food secure nation. But a lot of behavioral scientists would assert that when a generation of people have undergone and seen such kind of food scarcity, a fixation on food consumption, it triggers your food consumption as a society. So you would have all seen that, we take a lot of pride in saying कि हमारे घर तो हमेशा खाना बढ़ के बनता है, अगर कोई अचानक से आ जाए, 1-2 लोग हमेशा खाना खा सकते हैं. Or we equate hospitality with force feeding. We also equate parental love with how much, a mother feeds the child. All of the mothers are guilty here of कि बच्चा खाना नहीं खाता. So when it was scarce, when the food was scarce, then this behavior was probably justified. But now we have more food than ever, especially in the urban areas. But the behavior has somehow not caught up. We've not been able to evolve. At FSSAI, we very strongly believe that food waste can be controlled with behavioral calibration, but behavior is a vine, V-I-N-E, vine, which would need a support to grow on. And systems are going to be that support. So we try that we put in systems in place which can influence the behavioral change. How, if you'd ask, is under the Eat Right India movement flagship program, we have 6 certification programs. They are Eat Right Place of Worship, Eat Right Place of School, Eat Right Campus, so on and so forth. And they are marked by exhaustive checklist
And audit agencies undergo these systems. Through these checklists, they are audited. And then a FOSTAC training is given to all the people who are handling food and food vendors. And that's how we wish to put behavioral change and to simmer behavioral change through systemic interventions. So that is what, at our level, I think we see it more as a behavioral issue more than a systemic issue.
That's an important point. I mean, I think also connecting to what Mr. Agiora was saying, right? One is the question of trade-offs, how we look at data, what Dr. Dhingra was talking about benefits. There are like few key themes that are emerging when we think how we bring more attention and investment. These are all topics that we need to look at. With behavioral change, maybe I know FSSAI is already looking at, Eat Right campaign, but does that become a movement essentially? We need to really, like we've done in the past, total sanitation campaign, etc. There's a lot that we've done, right? So I guess that's the next, on the communication behavior side, lever that we need to think of. Gayatri, coming to you, similar question from, your perspective and learnings. When we think about, India needs to reduce food loss and waste, I think there's enough data and evidence to showcase, but where do you think, where we put attention, and how do we get more investments in the sector, just from your perspective?
Thanks very much. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a very useful way for me and also my team to learn more about what is happening in this space here and where we can bring some value as well. I come from a slightly different perspective. I think our sort of focus is very much on addressing the food loss side of it. But also food waste, I'll come to that in a minute, but food loss precisely because of the comments that my colleagues over here have made, which is that we are a little bit, at the point where we're a victim of our own success. We have had a very difficult past. We are now a food secure country. Our policies are not fit for purpose. Our policies are no longer fit for purpose. So addressing whatever that sort of the inadequacies of our current policies are currently will require us to address probably a range of issues, all the way from behavior to technology to understanding the impact on greenhouse gas emissions, all of it, right? It's a lot. And it's not going to happen overnight. Obviously, we all know this. So our approach would be probably to focus very much on understanding how we all come together to essentially show the value. I think you talked about benefits. I would say the value of making the investments in this space. The value comes from innovations. There are lots of very good brains out there who want to explore and do more in terms of understanding technologies that improve what we grow and how we use it. So innovation has to be really at the forefront of our current, our shifting policy framework so that we drive more and more solutions-based research and investments. The other is, how do we show this value through improved jobs, different kinds of jobs? Young people today don't aspire to do the things that probably their parents did or their grandparents did. They aspire to do something different. And they should, because times have changed, technologies have changed, interconnectivity is so much better. So how do we demonstrate value through more and better jobs? The third area is how we create more knowledge as we do all of this, so that we don't sort of assume that an invention or an innovation that we have today is it, that we've solved the problem, because history tells us the problem keeps shifting, the frontier keeps shifting. So learning, and I think you have somewhere a circular word in your title over here, that too is a circularity we have to deliberately build into, I think, the work that we do. Learning from failures and learning from successes. The problem shifts, how do we address it in the future? So looking forward, I think, is also very critical. finally, I would say that, yes, the waste part of it is important, because the waste part of it isn't just, in my view, that, we may be, not paying attention to it. It's more, again, coming back to my first point, using that waste as an opportunity. The waste generated by a larger population, a larger production base, also then potentially creates new opportunities for us to use new ways in which we use our waste. Sometimes the waste is because we are traditionally used to eating a certain part of something, and we have, certain behaviors associated with never eating some other part of it. Let me take coriander as an example. I lived many years in East Asia. You use the whole thing. Here, we cut off the root and we cut off, the stems and whatever. These things also potentially could change. That's a very small example. We could actually talk about how we use, as you showed, Madhavji showed, how you use peanuts as a way to create a new industry, more and better jobs. And so I think that's the way we would like to look at it. Thanks.
Thank you. I think you've kind of sort of also, nice summary of, when we think about getting more attention, the value piece is important. I mean, what does it bring for, what does it instill in us as consumers, or all of us who want to work on it? It could be a benefit story, it could be a, sort of a job story, it's a livelihood story and circularity story. And how do we sort of then get investments into some of this together becomes important. And the large second point, I think, which is a big key takeaway from me, is where the policy conditions or the enabling conditions are important. A lot of our, India has done fantastically in terms of, enabling policies, like for agriculture, and Dr. Dhingra, you made that point. For agriculture, a lot of policies and incentive we have. I mean, some of that is now shifting, given with green revolution, we needed certain kind of incentives. I think that's already being recognized. How do we build this momentum now for post-harvest? And, what needs to be done at the city scales? So different kind of incentives, and I think that needs a bit more fleshing out. And some of that we'll also be discussing in later sessions later in the day. But Mr. Hagiwara, coming back to you from FAO's perspective, going a bit deeper, I know FAO's has been involved, focusing a lot on wholesale markets and how they can also play a role in transformation, creating more inclusive livelihoods, etc. So could you tell us a little bit more about, how you see that particular stage really helping in strengthening the food systems in India?
Okay. In terms of the numbers tells us, the wholesale market doesn't lose much in terms of the number. So what is happening is that if you go to the wholesale market, you see the garbage on the floor. Also, I always say that many of the wholesale market become the restaurant for cows, because they roam around and then they eat in those leaves, and it is not the healthy issues. It comes to the issue of the facade, how to improve the food safety there rather than the food loss. Data doesn't show us a lot of the food loss happening in the wholesale market. We went to the, what is the name of the city, the Gujarat? Surat. Yeah. What is happening in the Surat is that they use those garbage or the leaves. They chop and then they create the biogas. And that generates the new gases, natural gases, to connect it to the grid. So in that sense, the investment can be made to the circular economy with the establishment of the wholesale market together with the biogas generation, and that can be done. So there is a way of not just looking at the food losses, but what is a byproduct, having that sort of the system, and then you can develop in the circular economy. That is innovation that comes in, and the investment can be made in that sort of area. If you start putting the cold chain in many of the full wholesale market, as I said, it's a trade-off. There is the electricity bills goes up, and more food will be preserved. But at the same time, the energy consumption will be much higher in terms of the food, the biogas, the GHG gas emission. So we have that trade-off again. So the investment have to look into not just in the food loss side, but also the GHG gas emission factor. And I just wanted to say that in total, from the NAPCON study, 18 billion US dollar worth of food is being lost in India alone. And if you convert only 30 commodity to the GHG gas emission, it's 33 million tons of the GHG gas, which is almost equivalent of the entire country of Sri Lanka emit the amount of the GHG. So huge amount is being lost in India. Huge amount of the GHG gas is emitted from food loss. So we really need to think about and where we need to really make the smart investments to be made. Thank you.
Thank you for sort of highlighting that within the wholesale market at city levels, there's a lot that can be done. And how do we think about circularity, one, but also the climate or the environmental impact point is important one. There isn't enough in terms of the GHG mitigation that's usually talked about. But if we just, and I don't think so we discussed this earlier, Rituja had pointed to some slides on that. If we think about food loss and food waste overall globally, it would be the third largest emitter. So, and in India, we've done some estimations like what you were saying, Mr. Hagewara. On farm, near farm, it's more than 60 million CO2 equivalent, annually. And as we go further towards the consumption side, the number is whooping 98 million. These are very high level numbers, and which basically speaks to the problem on how do we definitely need to act and get some of these investments in circularity. And then I would like to come to you. Again, sort of, on the same topic on if interventions that potentially could be done in wholesale markets, what Mr. Hagewara was talking about. From FSSAI's perspective, how do you see, what could be done to, one, have more efficiency, but what kind of interventions also from a food safety perspective, potentially, and, how is FSSAI thinking about some of that?
Yeah, we all would agree that wholesale markets, are an intersection point of food safety, food security, and logistics. Though infrastructure investments and infrastructure policies are the, under the domain of other ministries and other local bodies, but FSSAI is mostly focusing on the literacy side of it. So we provide fast-track training to the food vendors and the handlers there. Then, like I mentioned, that we have two very strong certification programs going called Clean Street Food Hub and Clean Fruit and Vegetable Market, wherein people are again trained and made literate about practices that they can follow in terms of segregating edible food from non-edible food, how they should do their waste management, and all of that. Temperature varied storage practices are also, we tell them the importance of temperature management when it comes to food storage, so that the shelf life and longevity of the food items get prolonged. Since I do have a little bit of background in logistics and operations and public distribution. So what Taka was mentioning about onion storage, recently I came across a very good news which I would want to share with all of you, that in terms of onion export, India was facing some kind of threats, but the industry and the government is now migrating to opting alternate practices which would increase the longevity of products like onion. Usually we were fumigating them chemically, but now a lot of investment is being made into, I think, fumigating it from infrared technology, from through radiation, irradiation technique, and all of that. And Dr. Dhingra would maybe assert more on that. A vapor heat technology is being used so that the longevity of these produce gets better, and in the export market, our produce gets, better stature. I believe that, the industry as well as the government is doing a good innovation in terms of, arresting these problems, which will eventually control the food waste and food losses.
Thanks for highlighting that. Essentially, we need basically many more public-private partnerships so that investments can flow is also, in a way, the takeaway, which actually brings me to you, Gayatri. If you could reflect a bit more in terms of what financing models of public-private partnership you've seen are working or crowding in more private investments, especially because when we think about innovations, we know that a lot of, and we have fantastic exhibition that you see at the back and which will get inaugurated later in the day. A lot of time these innovators also need patient capital, but they struggle with getting that or, need different kind of stacks of capital. So if you could talk a little bit more about how, what are the models that are working and, how do we crowd in more investments?
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult nut to crack. Let me be very honest right from the start. It's not that any of us have a silver bullet, but there are good stories and there are emerging, successes that give us some hope, right? Again, it's sort of like, okay, we're very successful at some things and then we're finding, oh, there's a new problem here, we have to try and find a solution over there, right? So it's a good problem to have, let's say. Now, what are some of the things that I think are critical, or what we are finding are quite critical? One is there has to be a lot more trust in the system, right? So having better regulatory frameworks, having clarity of what the food safety standards would be for you to be able to access a certain market that you are interested in reaching. This is all very important. So all of what my colleagues have mentioned in terms of training, in terms of getting more information out there, is absolutely critical in terms of building that trust of, yes, if I make this investment, I will be able to get my products into whichever market I'm looking at. The second area, however, which is very, very hard, is, well, where will I get my finance from? How will I make an investment that carries a significant amount of risk? And here I think we have to explore risk-sharing facilities, right, where we are able to offer to entrepreneurs who are entering into this space. Not so much the large entrepreneurs and enterprises who are already accessing the markets that they expect to enter, but the middle-sized, smaller enterprises where some of these innovations are actually emerging from. They do require some sort of risk-sharing facility. This is an area we as World Bank Group are trying very concertedly to look at and to offer actually what we consider to be World Bank Group solutions as opposed to any one of our agencies, right? And what I mean by this is we have a program called the AgriConnect. And the AgriConnect is aimed, which FAO is also a partner in, is aimed at ensuring that those foundational issues, let's say aggregation of farmers, so that they understand what the market requires and they get the access to the correct planting materials and they're able to grow for that market. That market meaning whoever is then going to purchase that from them, take it to the industry, do the processing, etc. That whole value chain, right? So getting the foundational issues right creates trust in the system. The second is getting that finance in place. And so AgriConnect offers I hope, a very real solution to this through things like I was mentioning earlier, the risk-sharing facilities, through perhaps getting NABARD finances to be more incentivized to reach this sector of smaller and medium enterprises, SIDBI, SBI. There are many channels through which money can flow. But again, getting the trust in that system is critical. So we hope that by offering these kinds of solutions through development partners, through our own support as well, we create more of that trust so that finance will flow into this space. And the last point I would make is that once this is starting to work, we re-examine it. I know I mentioned this earlier, but again, it's really important that we learn from whether or not this is working. and whether we need new models, new ways in which to expand this even more.
Thanks, Gayatri, for outlining that. I think issues of trust, how we think about standards, but most importantly, while we set up, risk facilities or de-risk some of the innovations, etc., we need to keep going back to seeing what works and what not. Sometimes a lot of it fails as well, but how do we learn from failures becomes equally important part so that we can move. And also, thanks, becomes important, which brings me to Dr. Dhingra. I mean, I think there's a lot, ICR, of course, itself has done a lot of innovations around post-harvest technologies that work, but adoption sometimes even with farmer producer organizations or MSMEs remains a challenge. From your perspective, what do you think? I mean, there's a lot of it has been discussed, but what are the barriers to scale some of this? How do we get some of the actors together, and what role could ICR, for instance, facilitate, and government in this?
Thank you, Ruchika. ICR has done innovations in post-harvest, in production agriculture as well as post-harvest sector. So initially the innovations were done on the basis of our own thought process. Not because of whether it is needed by the farmers or not. So innovations were done, then we are trying to market those innovations. So that becomes a challenge. So first you look at the farmer's capacity, how much he can afford. So farmer is when he is into production, from seeding, from planting till harvest, he spends a lot of time and money on that crop. Once he is harvesting that, after that it stays for a short time with the farmer. 1 day or 2 days or 3 days. By the time he tries to dispose it off and get the money, because it is only the revenue for the farmer. He doesn't have any other cash income. So we have to focus on that window when the farmer harvests the crop, and by the time he disposes, during that short period of 24 hours, 72 hours, what is required by the farmer, what he can do, what he can afford. So the innovations, most of them now fit into that small window. But still, for farmer, when it comes to spending money on those technologies, so he wants to get the money from his produce rather than investing more. Already he has invested a lot till the production. After that, he would like to dispose it off and get the money in our Indian system. Now, there, if he wants to spend more money, there are challenges. Because this family, there may be a marriage, there may be a demand for the education of the children, there may be a demand for the son wants to buy a bike. Every family has its own aspirations. So whether he will be spending to fulfill the aspirations of his family or her family, or he would like to spend more on post-harvest technology. So it's more of our our social system also. So as per se, innovations are available. They have been scaled down, downsized also. We have been pushing rural agro-processing to reduce the post-harvest losses, where they can locally, you don't have to move the produce to a long distance. You can process it locally, create employment out of it, and then sell it to your region also. If in case of innovations, when we talk about innovations, then challenges, when we are looking at exporting of products, agri-commodities from India, we are doing all kind of good practices. But when it comes to domestic market, we are not that willing to adopt those good practices because we don't get enough money out of it. That is the point of view of consumer also. We will be wasting less of milk and ghee or nuts, which are expensive. But we will be wasting more of wheat and rice, which is coming through public distribution system also. So this is our human behavior also, as Ananya has told, that has to be looked into. And also farmers and their families' aspirations. We have everything in this country. We have innovations. We have people who can still fine-tune them for the benefit of the farmers, but we will have to see, we will have to engage the farmers, enroll them that in that small window, when they harvest, whether it is grain, whether it is pulses, oilseeds, vegetables, onions, and until the time they dispose it off, are they ready to adopt those technologies, and what is the need? What kind of technologies do they need, so that more focus is done on developing those technologies and piloting those technologies, say through WRI and other agencies, and also talking to NABARD, FSSAI and World Bank that look, this is what we have struggled, and now the farmers, they need financing. So I think that will be very helpful in curtailing the losses and also benefiting the farmers and enrolling them into the advanced technologies.
Thank you, Dr. Dhingra. I think your point on why innovations are available, they've been downside. It's a lot about what value, I mean, it goes back to the value question in some sense. What's the value that you're going to get out of it? I mean, if we sort of, do the right sort of processing, for instance, can it reach the further, really far away market? Or even if it's in the local market, how do we make sure that the circularity is in there? And, we crowd in the right kind of investments, and this requires public-private partnership, and how do we do it right? I think you've been a fantastic audience. Maybe it's a good time to actually take some questions from the audience. We have some mics. If you could, introduce yourself, and also the question is directed to who? I see the lady here on the table. Yeah, you can go first.
Thank you. My name is Priyanka. I work for the Food Corporation of India. Thank you for the insights. I understand we are a food secure nation. I want to ask you, how do we adapt to the policy and practices to reduce food loss and waste as we transition to nutritional security? Also, as Ananya was telling about the behavioral part of food waste, I understand that almost 80 crore people in India are beneficiaries of public distribution system, as opposed to, let's say, just 60 crore people who are consuming and wasting food as a part of their behavior. How do you think this sort of 60 crore people overshadow the hand-to-mouth situation of the 80 crore people? Thank you.
Sorry, can you please repeat the second part of your question? What?
I understand there are 80 crore beneficiaries of the public distribution system. What you pointed out about the food waste as a part of the behavior part of the people. How do you think the behavior of wasting food of the 60 crore people overshadow the hand-to-mouth situation of the 80 crore beneficiaries?
Okay. First of all, we need to understand that it cannot be looked from a spectrum of only the people who are not under the PDS scheme or Antyodaya Yojana waste food. Food wastage goes on a larger scale, it's a larger issue. So this kind of demarcation would probably not be very fair, that people who do not come under these privileged schemes or government schemes waste food, and then this part gets overshadowed. Like how Dr. Gayatri also mentioned, that there are a lot of behavioral issues in terms of a consumption pattern. Like she mentioned coriander, similar cases with potato. We as consumers, we as a society do not eat the peel of the potato. Many other countries, many other civilizations, they do. So I would probably not see it from the lens of this versus that. This is actually an overall issue. This is a societal issue, and it has stemmed from the kind of history that I just enumerated, although the history is way complicated for us to reflect on in a minute. But this is more or less of a combined issue of haves and have-nots, rather than this being an eclipse of people who get food over people who do not get food. So overall behavioral change is required as far as food waste is concerned, is what I believe. I mean, we can't leave anybody out of this. That these people are privileged to get food, so only they need to be made literate, or they need to be sensitized, whereas the people who are under the PDS schemes do not. I think we all need to be equally sensitized as a culture. Yes.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Yadav, MD, Kosan. I have a small query from Ananya. You said in the beginning that we have a program to sensitize and train the people of wholesale market, and particularly the vegetable market. And Mr. Taka also pointed out that our wholesale markets are known as cow restaurants. And the biggest weakness in my understanding, because I come from the wholesale market today, is the food safety hygiene standards in the wholesale market. And to our understanding so far, we have tried many times in almost every state, no one has come forward. So would you please let me know which are the markets where you have made interventions? What are the results? And who is coordinating, so that if it is, we have good results, we can replicate the same to others. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. This also gives me an opportunity to elaborate more on the certification programs that we're doing. So, as I would not only restrict to wholesale market, but I would just give you a brief of the kind of certification programs that FSSAI is running under the Eat Right movement. So, there are 6 certification programs: Eat Right Place of Worship for temples, churches, and mosques who serve food; Eat Right School, Eat Right Campuses, Clean Street Food Hub, and Clean Fruit and Vegetable Market, and Hygiene Rating. So a composure, a combination of all these 6 kind of certifications intersect across the ecosystem. And through these certification programs, we are trying to bring in a change. There is an exhaustive checklist which is based on food safety, food hygiene, and sustainable waste management practices. Along with this, FOSTAC training is imparted to the food handlers and the food vendors, and then the certification is accorded. Their audit happens, and once they get a certain amount of marks in the audit, pre-audit and post-audit, and then the training is complete, the certification is awarded, which has to be renewed every 2 years, every 1 year, depending upon the kind of certification. As far as you know, I know I'm not asserting, or I'm not claiming that we've done everything that is required, otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here. There is a lot more that is to be done, and the coordination space that you asked, so we all know that food is a concurrent subject. So we, along with the state food department, coordinate this. The state FDA identifies the places, and then the audit partners, they go. We have a training team, FOSTAC training partners we have an in-house team as well, who go and train those vendors, and that's how on field this is executed and the certifications are given. As of now, this is a mandatory sort of a course, because FSSAI strongly believes that regulation, yes, would enforce the kind of mechanism that we're trying to put in place, but we are also trying to be an enabler more than an enforcer. So that's why all these programs that run, they are as of now mandatory, voluntary in nature, they're not mandatory, and we're trying to build a dialogue around enabling people to come forward. And like there are a lot of Eat Right station. So a lot of railway stations, they take a lot of pride in mentioning that now they are Eat Right station. So we are trying to build a brand across this concept so that people voluntarily come and voluntarily put in systems in places, and behavioral changes do occur with help of the systems in place.
Excuse me, ma'am, can I take another 1 minute? And though I understand it's crossing time,
if we can...
just one small, because it's a very practical problem in the entire country.
Please go ahead. I'll take your feedback.
Yeah.
Sir, can I request that you take
have,
that question in the tea break?
Just because many participants are coming from various state agriculture marketing boards, and they are facing this problem, they are APMC secretaries and deputy directors, they face this problem every day. They don't know whom to approach for this certification. Everyone knows how to get a certificate for a dhaba or a restaurant or a food court or a street vendor, everyone knows. But wholesale market is not aware which department, whether FDA, State Food Authority or direct FSSAI, and who is nodal officer at the national or state, no one is aware. That's what, if you can take up this
Great
issue,
feedback.
would
Well
be grateful.
taken, since
Thank
you are in touch with the reality and you're coming from the field. I really appreciate that, you've brought it across to us. We'll definitely look into it, that, we make people more aware. If he's telling, then probably, yes, definitely. Thank you so much.
I would like to add a little bit. We have been discussing this whenever we're talking about post-harvest, and in many meetings with this Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister and others. We tell that we have to start. For exports, we are doing a lot of good things, but for domestic market, the condition of our fruit and vegetable market is abysmal. We need to upgrade them. We need to involve some technology into that. And maybe FSSAI can go for, say, HACCP certification for the fruit and vegetable markets. I was going to come to that point that we need some legislation now that we have to improve.
The audit systems that are in place, they already incorporate.
Okay. Okay, but it has not been made mandatory for the markets. So maybe now the time is that we create a legislation and make it mandatory so that improvements happen. Otherwise, everyone is making money out of that. Farmers only get 1/3, but neither the farmers nor the consumers are benefiting. So some kind of mandatory condition, some kind of legislation has to come that makes it mandatory for the fruit and vegetable markets. The HACCP certification for them is a must now. So that will help us in improving the condition of the fruit and vegetable markets, as also improving circular economy, reduction in everything else will be accounted for with that.
Thank you, Dr. Dhingra.
Can I just take 30 seconds to respond to that and just clear this out? So the audit mechanism, which is already there, does incorporate HACCP in it. And why we didn't make it mandatory is because we already are known as, regulators are known as ki danda chalate hain or, enforcers hain. So we also wanted to, act more as enablers, and that's why these certification programs have been completely, kept away as secluded side programs which are voluntary in nature. But then, yes, of course, there will be, pointers of how much to enforce and how much to be left to people. And definitely, maybe in future, we can think about making some of them mandatory programs.
Thank you. I think this topic obviously needs a lot more discussion. Maybe over coffee break, you can have further conversations on this. I would have liked to take one more question, but we are really running out of time now. Just one sort of, if I have to ask all of you, when you think about reducing food loss and waste, what is one big lever that sort of, from your perspective, less than a minute, you think is really needed in the Indian context? I don't know if you want to start on this one.
For me, it would be a sense of urgency. And the reason for that is that it has to match the sense of urgency we appear to have as a country on the move, right? We appear to have that sense of urgency as to we have to grow more, we have to have more, we have to do better. That same sense of urgency should be applied to food loss and waste. There are so many opportunities, and we can all do better, and we have to just do it faster and with more sense of achievement. Thanks.
Dr. Dhingra, one word.
There are many, it's very difficult. So I think in future we need, in a country like India with the problems, low temperature storage is going to be in thing which we will have to work on. And apart from that, we will have to look into the farmers' needs and also change the attitude towards this. We are wasting a lot, like we are producing tomato trail, WRI did. So a lot of inputs go into that, but when the tomato is now available year-round, there is no one controlling that look, we cannot waste. So I think it is a time, as Ananya has also told that we are going with voluntary, not mandatory, but I think the time has come when we are spending a lot of inputs, finance, credit, interest. We have to see that after the baby is born, it is taken care of, right? So that is very important.
Thank you. Ananya.
Yeah, in addition to what both these colleagues of mine said, I think I would be very interested in seeing design level innovations from businesses and of course from policy level. Like I'll just give you a quick example of when we go to, let's say, a restaurant, sometimes I want to eat a particular thing, but maybe not too much of it. or maybe I want to feel a particular texture food, but not too much of it. So maybe menu designing or smart portions around how we serve food in businesses. So design level, maybe, interventions is what comes to my mind. And of course, what ma'am said, that a sense of urgency, that is more of a behavioral impetus that we need to give, and what Dr. Dhingra said, that investment in state-of-art technologies.
Mr. Agiwal.
Okay, as I mentioned to you, the 85% of food loss happen on the farm operations. So we really need to work with the farmers to reduce the food loss. That's one. The second is, I noticed the Indians are very price sensitive. Everybody goes to the cheap food. Often the case, I'm sorry to say. But you have to ready to pay a little bit more so that the profit margin can make a bigger. This is where that people can get in the money and then invest in. If you keep the price down, the profit margin is very small, the investment cannot be made because the lack of the profit. So we really need to look into that sort of the aspect as well. And then the food sector, food sector is very volatile, very high risk. And in order to make the investment, the government has to have sort of the loan guarantee scheme so that those players who are willing to invest in new technologies or innovation may bankrupt, but there is a guarantee of the loan that can be saved. Otherwise, nobody would be, or no bank would be willing to invest into the high volatile, high risk sector. So this is where that I would like to emphasize. 3 point, work with the farmers. You should be ready to pay a little bit more on the food, and then develop the loan guarantee scheme. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's been a very rich discussion, and the sense of urgency, I hope we also have a lot more discussion on that, but also behavior change. How do we, change patterns for all of us while we serve, even at restaurants, or, as consumers, we need to start all talking about getting more finance and innovation. Thank you so much. I will pass it back to my colleague Drishti.
Thank you, Ruchika, and our distinguished panelists for a very insightful session. May I now request Ruchika and our panelists to join us on stage for a group photograph. We'll also be presenting a small token of appreciation as a small gesture of our gratitude for their time and contribution.